Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Authorities in Minneapolis, Minnesota say that a 10-year-old boy is facing charges this week following the release of wild surveillance footage which allegedly shows him recklessly driving a stolen vehicle through a school park where dozens of other children were playing. The whole thing took place sometime on September 20th on the grounds of the Nellie Stone Johnson School near North 27th and North Lyndale Avenues. The video shows a large group of children playing on the school's playground as a car speeds around nearby, making multiple passes as visibly concerned adults can be seen trying to figure out what's going on. At first, the car is driving on the grass behind the park, but eventually it whips by on the sidewalk just feet away from some of the children. Thankfully, no one was injured as a result of the incident, as school staff were able to move everyone out of harm's way. However, it's easy to see how things could have turned out differently. After investigating the incident, the situation got even more unbelievable when police were able to identify the driver. They now say that not only is the suspect a 10-year-old boy, but he apparently has quite the lengthy and disturbing criminal history. According to police, the 10-year-old has been involved in at least 30 reports since May of 2023 for crimes related to auto theft, robbery, and assault with a deadly weapon. In at least one of these incidents, the boy was allegedly part of a group of minors who attempted to carjack a woman at knife point, during which the victim was threatened and told, quote, "I will gut you." While the 10-year-old is facing a number of charges related to several of these incidents, as well as new charges of reckless driving and receiving stolen property in connection with the September Park incident, police have expressed their concerns that these types of situations aren't being dealt with properly. They say that due to the suspect's age, there is a significant chance that these cases will not move forward, but that there is also no support once kids like him are released back into the community. In this case, the boy's family has apparently repeatedly asked for help, but police say their hands are tied. In a statement released this week, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office directly laid out some of these concerns, stating in part, quote, "We are facing an urgent crisis in our community related to a small group of children who are not competent to stand trial in the juvenile justice system, but who cannot safely be at home. We are actively engaged with law enforcement as well as county and state partners about the critical need for safe and appropriate out-of-home placements for children with these complex needs who require specialized care. We cannot charge or prosecute our way out of this crisis. What we need is clear: residential placements with varying levels of security in our community that are resourced and staffed to be able to accept and successfully treat our youth with complex needs. And we need urgent and immediate action to address this issue now." Authorities in Altoona, Pennsylvania say that a 43-year-old woman is facing a number of charges this week after she allegedly attacked and tried to kill her boyfriend during the middle of the night because he refused to give her his anti-anxiety medication. The whole thing began at around 1 a.m. on October 5th when police were called to a residence on the 2200 block of Broad Avenue with reports of a domestic incident. They arrived to find a male victim, who has not been identified by name, who was suffering from knife wounds to his hands and neck. The man explained that a short time earlier he had awoken to find his live-in girlfriend of 8 years, 43-year-old Rebecca Edwards, standing over him with a large kitchen knife. Edwards allegedly held the knife to his throat and demanded that he give her his Klonopin pills. When the man refused, he said that Edwards replied, quote, "I'm going to kill you. You don't think I'll do it?" That's when she began trying to slash his throat. The man stated that he was able to disarm his girlfriend, but that she had quickly grabbed another knife and continued the attack. This is how he reportedly sustained the defensive wounds to his hands. When officers arrived at the scene, they found one of the blood-stained weapons, as well as blood in various spots throughout the home that backed up the male victim's story. Edwards also apparently admitted to the crime, though claimed that her boyfriend had shared his medication with her in the past. The 43-year-old was arrested at the scene and is now facing charges including criminal attempted homicide, aggravated assault, possession of instruments of a crime, terroristic threats, reckless endangerment, and simple assault. Representatives from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division released a tragic update on the disappearance of a young woman last week, announcing that after nearly 2 months, her remains had been successfully located and identified, and that 3 people have now been arrested and charged in connection with her murder. The case began on September 10th when officers from the Pendleton Police Department were contacted by the mother of 20-year-old Jessica Barnes. The woman explained that she had not seen her daughter since the beginning of August, and though she had received text messages from a person claiming to be her, she did not believe these had been sent by Jessica. Pendleton police traveled to the home where Jessica lived with her 22-year-old husband, Brandon Barnes, as well as their 2 roommates, 20-year-old Kendall Mims and 20-year-old Victoria Tippett. The 3 stated that Jessica had left the home a few weeks earlier, but they didn't know where she was going. Initially, Brandon and the 2 roommates weren't considered suspects, though their descriptions of what had happened with Jessica were vague. They said that she and Brandon were experiencing marital issues and that she had taken off abruptly. Things started to change when the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division were brought in to assist with the case, and they were able to track a vehicle owned by one of the roommates to a wooded location in the Twin Lakes area of Pickens County. It was here, roughly 6 miles from the Pendleton address, that they discovered human remains. Dental records revealed that these were the remains of Jessica Barnes, and an autopsy ruled that she had died of asphyxiation by strangulation. Following subsequent interviews with Jessica's husband and roommates, all 3 reportedly admitted to being involved in her murder. It's now alleged that Brandon was directly responsible for the killing, and that Mims and Tippett helped him to cover up the crime. Police further claimed that the roommates had ample opportunity to report the murder, but neglected to do so. Brandon Barnes has now been charged with murder, while the 2 women face charges including accessory after the fact and obstruction of justice. At the time of this recording, police say they are still trying to uncover the exact motive and circumstances surrounding the awful crime. Authorities in Seattle, Washington are asking the public for help this week as they search for answers behind the death of a local missing woman whose remains were found under disturbing circumstances after nearly a year. The situation began on September 27th when police and workers from state and local nonprofits went to clean up a homeless encampment in a wooded area near the junctions of Interstate 5 and Interstate 90. 2 days earlier, the makeshift community had been the scene of a shooting, and though an arrest had been made, due to a number of other similar incidents and ongoing problems there, authorities had decided to clear the encampment. During the process, some of the workers noted a foul odor that was coming from a large suitcase that had been left amongst the tents and piles of trash. Inside were the remains of a woman. Upon further investigation, police announced this week that they had identified the remains as those of 37-year-old Shannon Marie Caslin Reeder. Shannon was a local mother in the area who had been reported missing nearly a year earlier and who hadn't been seen since November of 2023. Though sadly not much information is available about Shannon or her life leading up to her disappearance, friends say that they had searched for her extensively. They tried reaching out to her repeatedly on her phone and on social media as well, but became incredibly worried when they weren't able to get a hold of her. These same friends say that Shannon had a tough life and lost her mother at the age of just 15, but despite this was a positive and carefree person. They described her as silly and spontaneous and not needing much to be happy. At the time of this recording, police say that they are still investigating the exact cause of Shannon's death, but that they are treating the situation as a homicide. The circumstances leading up to her alleged murder remain a mystery, and authorities say that they are now working to piece together a timeline of her movements leading up to her disappearance. Investigators are asking for members of the public who might have information about the case, or who may have been in contact with Shannon any time in the last year, to please come forward. Anyone with information is asked to reach out to detectives at the following numbers displayed on screen. Representatives from the Alaska State Troopers say that a 20-year-old man has been arrested and is facing a slew of serious charges this week after he was accused of brutally stabbing a pair of young women to death, one of whom was his own cousin. The disturbing case began sometime on the morning of October 2nd when an awful discovery was made at a residence in the coastal community of Hooper Bay. The bodies of 2 women, later identified as Novelli Rivers and Abigail Olson, were found lying in the middle of a violent and bloody crime scene. The 18-year-old best friends had been viciously attacked, suffering blunt force injuries as well as more than 60 stab and slash wounds from a knife. After launching an investigation, state troopers uncovered text messages between Novelli and her 20-year-old cousin, Shaquille Karawan. In that conversation, Karawan stated that he was on his way over to meet up with the women, and that he would bring marijuana as well as some homebrewed alcohol he had made. The text messages abruptly stopped after the 20-year-old indicated he had arrived. When troopers traveled to Karawan's home, they found bloody shoes, the treads from which reportedly matched bloodstains at the crime scene. Blood-stained clothing was also recovered, as well as a blue kitchen knife found hidden between the refrigerator and a wall, which is now believed to be the murder weapon. During questioning, Karawan allegedly admitted to murdering both of the teens, stating that the killings had been the result of an argument that had escalated into a physical altercation. No additional specifics about the motive were provided, though the 20-year-old apparently also told police that he had thrown Novelli and Abigail's phones in a lake on his way home after the murders. Both devices were later found where he had indicated. At the time of this recording, Karawan is facing a number of charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, misconduct involving a controlled substance, and furnishing alcohol to minors in a dry community. He remains in custody. Representatives from the Kentucky State Police say that they are investigating a truly haunting crime this week after a woman allegedly gruesomely murdered her own mother as part of a killing that is also believed to have included occult practices. The whole thing began at around 12:30 p.m. on October 9th, when a team of contractors arrived at a residence on the 3500 block of Briarly Ridge Road in the town of Mount Olivet. The workers had been hired by the homeowner, Trudy Fields, to construct a building on her property. However, when they arrived, they received no answer at the front door. One of the men, who had been at the property just a day earlier, decided to head around back to investigate, only to encounter a horrifying scene. Near the rear entrance to the home, he found a pile of hair, a blood-stained mattress, and what appeared to be drag marks in the grass. When he followed the marks, they led him to the partial remains of a human body. When police were called to the scene and investigated further, things only got more disturbing. They recovered additional blood evidence and remains, including what they determined to be several human organs. After speaking to the worker that had called 911, authorities learned that when the contractors had been at the residence the previous day, Trudy's adult daughter, 32-year-old Toralina Fields, was acting aggressive and strange. The worker said that while he was speaking with Trudy, Toralina was, quote, casting spells on them and being confrontational. While searching the scene, it became clear that Toralina was actually inside of the home. However, she refused to cooperate with police. She was only removed from the residence about 11 hours later after officers deployed multiple rounds of tear gas and a police robot. When the 32-year-old finally did emerge, she reportedly had blood on her face, hands, and clothes. A search inside the residence revealed additional chilling evidence. Inside were even more body parts, including some that had allegedly been cooked inside of a steel pot in the home's oven. While the identity of the dismembered victim has not been officially determined at this point, police say they believe the remains are those of Trudy Fields. So far, Toralina has been charged with obstructing governmental operations, tampering with physical evidence, and abuse of a corpse, though further charges are expected to follow. Representatives from Idaho's Ada County Sheriff's Office released a major update in a more than 44-year-old cold case investigation last week, announcing that after all of this time, they had finally solved the brutal murder of a local woman. The case began all the way back on June 26, 1980, when a crew of road workers found the body of a woman in an irrigation ditch along Highway 55, just north of the Boise suburb of Eagle. The woman had sustained 11 stab wounds to the left side of her body, including injuries to her neck and chest. There were further blunt force wounds to the back of her head, as well as defensive injuries that indicated she had fought hard against her attacker. The victim was quickly identified as Mary Tracy, a 24-year-old mother of 2 who was from the local area. At the time, Mary was living just outside of Boise in Garden City and had last been seen 2 days before her body was discovered. That was when she had left her 2 daughters with a friend at the local Sunliner motel following an argument with her husband. Naturally, Mary's husband was the first suspect to be considered, as police found out that they were going through a period of marital and financial stress. However, he was ruled out after it was determined he was in the hospital at the time of the murder. While speaking to witnesses, investigators learned that there were rumors that someone had been killed at the Sunliner motel. A maid even claimed that she had found blood in one of the rooms there. This was interesting not only because Mary was staying at the motel, but because based on her autopsy, police concluded that she had been killed somewhere else before being moved to where her body was found. However, the business denied that any crime had taken place there, and without any substantial evidence, police came up short. With that, the case went cold. Things would stay that way until August of 2023, when the investigation was reopened at the request of Mary's daughters. When it was, one suspect stood out, a man named Charles Nicholas Strain. Strain had a disturbing criminal history, one that spanned many years and multiple states across the Pacific Northwest. In 1981, he kidnapped his 10-year-old daughter, who he did not have custody of, and fled to Arizona, where he remained for over 2 years. In 1986, he was charged and convicted in the murder of his 16-year-old stepdaughter, Deanna Dean, who died of a gunshot wound to the head. The teen had been missing for 5 years before Strain was finally caught. Not only was Strain living in the Garden City area around the time of Mary Tracy's murder, but according to police, previous interviews with a jailhouse informant had connected him to the case. The informant claimed that Strain had confessed to killing a woman around the same time that Mary was murdered. Specifically, Strain allegedly told him, quote, "I just killed a girl, and I threw her over a ditch." Unfortunately, by the time the new investigative team learned of this information in 2023, the informant had been dead for 30 years, so it wasn't possible to re-interview him. However, they were able to test DNA from some of Strain's prior crimes against evidence from the 1980 Mary Tracy murder. This included a strange scrap of newspaper that had been found stuck to Mary's head at the time her body was discovered, which turned out to have been printed more than 10 years earlier. Eerily, the newspaper apparently contained an article about Richard Speck, the notorious killer convicted of murdering 8 nursing students in a single night. In June of this year, testing revealed that Strain's DNA matched evidence in the Mary Tracy case, indicating that he was almost certainly the person responsible for her murder. Unfortunately, Strain cannot be charged in connection with the case, though, as he died in prison in 2007 while serving his sentence for the murder of his stepdaughter. During their announcement last week, police stated that they now consider Mary's case closed, though they are still hoping to tie up a couple of loose ends. In particular, they say that they want to speak to anyone who worked at the Sunliner motel during the summer of 1980. They are also attempting to track down a friend of Mary's named Lisa, who may have been one of the last people to see her alive. Anyone with information about the case is encouraged to reach out to the Ada County Sheriff's Office. Representatives from Ontario's Niagara Regional Police say that they have arrested and charged a suspected serial killer this week, one who they allege was responsible for the murders of 3 people over 3 days last week across the Greater Toronto Area. The situation began at around 2 p.m. on October 1st, when Toronto police were called about a violent incident at a home near Keele and Dundas Streets. They arrived to find a woman in her 60s who was unresponsive and suffering from serious injuries. Sadly, she was pronounced dead at the scene. So far, her name has not been officially released, though multiple local news sources have identified her as a resident of the home named Trinh T. Vu. Just over 24 hours later, and roughly 80 miles away, police in Niagara Falls were called about a disturbance at John Allen Park. Officers arrived to find a man suffering from critical injuries. That man, 47-year-old Lance Cunningham, had reportedly been out walking his dog when he was attacked. Despite the best efforts of emergency responders, he died from his injuries. The final murder was uncovered just after noon on October 3rd, when police were called about a stabbing at a parking lot near McNabb Street North in the city of Hamilton. They arrived to find 77-year-old retired schoolteacher Mario Bilic, who was also critically wounded. He was taken to a hospital where tragically he was later pronounced dead. Just a few hours later, just before 6 p.m., police made an arrest in connection with all 3 cases at a hotel in the city of Burlington. The suspect is a 30-year-old woman named Sabrina Kaldar. According to investigators, Kaldar was identified after surveillance footage showed her following the final victim as he walked down the street in Hamilton. Additional video reportedly shows her fleeing the area immediately afterwards. As for the motives behind the crimes, nothing has been confirmed publicly, though it's believed that the two male victims were randomly targeted. The female victim, meanwhile, Trin Tivu, is said to have been a housemate of Kaldar's in the residence where the first murder took place. At the time of this recording, Kaldar remains in custody and has been charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, as well as 1 count of first-degree murder. The first-degree murder count is in relation to the final killing in Hamilton. Currently, Kaldar has had her court appearances adjourned until she can undergo a mental health evaluation. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.